I remember the relentless gnawing emptiness that used to plague me between trades. The screen, a silent, mocking testament to my inaction, felt like a void I had to fill. Every tick, every flicker of a price, whispered promises of opportunity, and I, in my blindness, believed that activity was the currency of the market. I chased every whisper, every phantom setup, convinced that my survival depended on constant engagement. My hands twitched, my mind raced, and the silence of waiting felt like a personal failure, a sign of weakness. I knew intellectually that I should wait, that true edges were rare, but the urge to do something was an unbearable itch I had to scratch, constantly. It was a compulsion, a desperate need to feel in control, to prove I was actively participating in the game. This was the error, the fundamental flaw that cost me more than just money. The price I paid was steep, etched into the very fabric of my being. Account blow-ups became a recurring nightmare, each one a fresh wound to my pride and my dwindling capital. The shame burned, not just from the financial losses, but from the crushing realization that I was my own worst enemy. I saw other traders, seemingly calm, disciplined, and profitable, and the contrast only amplified my suffering. I was stuck in a vicious cycle, chasing losses with more activity, which led to more losses, more frustration, and deeper self-doubt. The market wasn't just taking my money. It was stripping away my confidence, my peace of mind, and my belief in my own judgment. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, and utterly lost in the chaos I had created for myself. The market didn't care about my effort, my desperation, or my relentless activity. It only cared about one thing: the disciplined, patient execution of a clear plan, and I had none. The epiphany arrived, not in a sudden flash of insight, but through the slow, agonizing process of attrition and desperate introspection. I was on the brink, staring into the abyss of complete financial ruin and emotional breakdown. It was in that moment of absolute surrender, when I finally stopped fighting myself and the market, that I began to understand. The market wasn't a game of constant engagement. It was a profound test of my own internal fortitude. Waiting wasn't a void to be filled, or a sign of weakness. It was the very space where clarity and genuine opportunity revealed themselves. I learned that true power wasn't in acting, but in the disciplined refusal to act until the conditions were undeniably, unequivocally right. This wasn't about being passive. It was about being acutely active in my self-control, in my observation, in my unwavering commitment to my rules. Jesse Livermore's words echoed, not as a distant theory, but as a lived, brutal truth. The market doesn't pay you for activity. It pays you for patience. This was the lesson discovered. Patience isn't a passive virtue. It is an aggressive, intentional act of self-mastery. It is the conscious choice to stand aside, to absorb the market's noise without reacting, to conserve capital and emotional energy for the truly high-probability setups. It meant confronting my deepest fears, the fear of missing out, the fear of doing nothing, the fear of being wrong, and overriding them with a cold, clear discipline. It meant understanding that I was not competing against the market, but against my own impulses, my own human weaknesses. The market pays for precision, for conviction, for the iron will to wait for the fat pitch, and only then to swing with purpose. It pays for the solitude of observation, for the unwavering focus that comes from internal control, not external frenzy. And so, my entire approach transformed. The relentless pursuit of activity gave way to a profound respect for inaction. The urge to constantly be in a trade was replaced by the serenity of waiting for the perfect moment. I stopped trying to force the market to conform to my desires and started aligning myself with its natural rhythm. This journey was not about finding a secret indicator or a magical strategy. It was about confronting the most dangerous opponent I would ever face, myself. It was about the brutal, liberating truth that sometimes the most profitable thing you can do is absolutely nothing at all. This discipline, born from pain and regret, became my redemption. It is the foundation of consistency, the bedrock of emotional control, and the path to true longevity in these unforgiving waters. No longer do I seek to conquer the market. I seek to conquer myself. If this message resonates with the echoes of your own struggles and triumphs, I invite you to engage. Like this video to acknowledge the truth of patience. Comment below with your own experiences of overtrading or disciplined waiting. And subscribe to Livermore Mind for more insights into the psychological battleground that is the market. The epiphany arrived, not in a sudden flash of insight, but through the slow, agonizing process of attrition and desperate introspection. I was on the brink, staring into the abyss of complete financial ruin and emotional breakdown. The void I once tried to fill with activity now swallowed me whole. No more chasing phantom opportunities, just the stark, unforgiving silence of total defeat. It was in that silence, that absolute stillness, that something shifted. I had to stop. I had to simply stop. The compulsion to act, that frantic energy, finally exhausted itself. It wasn't a choice, it was a surrender. My hands, once twitching, lay still. My mind, once racing, grew quiet. The screen, once a torment, became a mere window. I began to see it differently. Not as a battlefield demanding constant engagement, but as a vast, indifferent ocean. I had mistaken motion for progress. I had confused noise for signal. The market wasn't asking for my effort. It demanded something else entirely. It demanded patience. It demanded stillness. This was the first, brutal truth that began to surface from the wreckage. The market pays you for waiting. It pays you for doing nothing, for long stretches of time, until the undeniable opportunity presents itself. It pays for the discipline to sit on your hands when there is no edge. It pays for the strength to ignore the whispers, the temptations, the fear of missing out. The pain of my past losses, the shame of those blown accounts, coalesced into a single piercing insight. Every mistake, every frantic trade, every desperate attempt to recover, was a direct consequence of my inability to wait. My activity was a tax I willingly paid to the market for my own impatience. The more active I was, the more I paid. It was a simple equation, brutally exposed. I had been paying for my own self-destruction. The true edge, I started to understand, wasn't some complex indicator or secret strategy. It was the mental fortitude to remain disengaged until the odds were overwhelmingly in my favor. It was the clarity of mind that came from not being constantly entangled in the market's noise. The quiet confidence of knowing exactly what I was looking for, refusing to settle for anything less. This meant long periods of observation, days, sometimes weeks, without placing a single trade. This was the antithesis of everything I had once believed. My old self would have screamed at the perceived inaction. My old self would have felt the gnawing emptiness, the terror of missed opportunities. But the new understanding, forged in the fires of defeat, offered a different kind of strength. It was the strength to endure the waiting. The strength to accept that the market does not care about my desire to trade, only about my capacity to be right. And being right often meant being still. The greatest profits, I realized, were not found in the flurry of activity, but in the deep, unyielding calm of anticipation. The market was not a machine for instant gratification. It was a mechanism that rewarded strategic inaction. It was a game of chess, not checkers. Every move had to be deliberate, calculated, and only made when the advantage was clear. This shift was excruciating. The old habits, deeply ingrained, fought back fiercely. The urge to check the screen every few minutes, to find a reason to enter, lingered like a phantom limb. The fear of being left behind, of watching others profit while I did nothing, was a constant battle. But the memory of the abyss, of the complete ruin, served as a powerful deterrent. I had seen the cost of my addiction to activity. I had felt the crushing weight of its consequences. Now, I chose a different path. A path of deliberate restraint. A path of quiet observation. A path where patience was not a weakness, but the ultimate weapon. It was a slow, arduous climb out of the emotional and financial pit. Each day, I practiced the art of doing nothing. Each day, I resisted the urge to act on impulse. Each day, I learned to value the silence between trades. This was not about willpower alone. It was about a fundamental rewiring of my perception. The market was no longer an enemy to be fought, but a complex system to be understood. Understanding it meant respecting its rhythms, its periods of quiet, its moments of explosive clarity. The rewards, I began to see, were not for the busy, but for the discerning. They were not for the active, but for the patient. My focus shifted from the quantity of my trades to the quality of my entries. From constant engagement to precise strike, I started to appreciate the power of absence, the power of allowing opportunities to ripen, rather than picking them green. The market, in its infinite wisdom, had taught me a brutal lesson. It wasn't about what I did, but about what I chose not to do. It wasn't about my effort, but about my discipline. It was about the profound understanding that sometimes the most powerful action is no action at all. This was the beginning of my true education. The moment I stopped fighting the market and started to listen, and what it whispered back was a truth as old as time itself. The market doesn't pay you for activity. It pays you for patience. The market became a mirror. It reflected not my efforts, but my discipline, not my desires, but my restraint. This profound reorientation demanded a daily reckoning with myself. The urge to act, deeply ingrained, did not vanish overnight. It became a constant companion, a whisper I had to learn to silence. I practiced stillness. I sat before the screen, not seeking an entry, but observing, allowing the chaos to unfold without my intervention. The perceived inaction, once a source of gnawing emptiness, transformed into a quiet strength. It was the strength of conscious refusal, the strength of deliberate detachment. I learned to distinguish between noise and signal, not through complex analysis, but through the profound clarity that only comes from quiet observation. Most market movements were irrelevant. They were distractions, designed to ensnare the impatient. My former self would have been caught in every eddy, every false current. Now, I watched them pass, unmoved. My focus narrowed. I was no longer seeking any opportunity, but the opportunity. The one that aligned perfectly with my refined understanding. The one that screamed its presence, undeniable and clear. This was a rare event. It meant long stretches of waiting, sometimes days, sometimes weeks, without a single trade. The fear of missing out, once a paralyzing force, began to recede. It was replaced by a deeper understanding. There would always be another opportunity. The market was an endless river. My task was not to jump into every ripple, but to wait for the perfect confluence, the moment when the currents aligned precisely in my favor. This required an almost monastic patience, a detachment from the immediate gratification that had once driven my self-destructive behavior. I found peace in the waiting, a strange, unexpected serenity in the absence of action. My energy, once dissipated in frantic trades, was conserved. My mind, once cluttered with anxiety, became sharp, focused. The emotional toll of constant engagement, the exhaustion that had defined my past, began to lift. I started to trust the silence. I started to trust my own judgment, honed by countless hours of quiet observation and the brutal lessons of the past. The market ceased to be an adversary. It became a teacher, its lessons subtle, profound, and often delivered through inaction. It taught me that my greatest asset was not my ability to predict, but my capacity to wait. My greatest edge was not speed, but stillness. The price charts, once a source of frenetic anxiety, now spoke a different language. They revealed patterns, not of immediate profit, but of underlying forces, of accumulation and distribution, of patience rewarded and impatience punished. I no longer fought the market. I flowed with it, moving only when its true intentions were undeniably clear. This was not about willpower alone. It was a fundamental shift in perception, a spiritual transformation of sorts. I had to shed the ego that demanded constant validation through activity. I had to let go of the need for control, understanding that true control lay in controlling myself, not the market. My trading became a meditation. Each potential setup was analyzed, not with urgency, but with a calm, discerning eye. If it wasn't perfect, I let it go, without regret, without the gnawing feeling of missed profit. Because I knew, with absolute certainty, that imperfection would lead back to the abyss. The memory of that abyss was a constant guide, a silent sentinel guarding against old habits. It reminded me of the true cost of chasing whispers, of filling the void with meaningless activity. It reinforced the profound truth. The market pays for patience, not for effort. It pays for the quiet resolve to wait for the undeniable, the obvious. It pays for the discipline to do nothing, for as long as it takes. This was the foundation of my new existence in the market, a foundation built not on ambition, but on humility, not on aggression, but on restraint, not on constant doing, but on profound being. It was the quiet revolution within myself that truly changed everything. The revolution was quiet, yes, but its impact was loud and clear in my actions. My engagement with the market, once a frantic, desperate struggle, became a deliberate, almost ritualistic process. The screen, no longer a demanding master, transformed into a mere canvas, reflecting the market's evolving narrative. I sat before it, not with the gnawing hunger of my past, but with a quiet, observant detachment. The impulses, those relentless urges to act, to fill the silence with motion, still surfaced. They were like phantom pains, echoes of a former affliction. But now, I recognized them for what they were. Tests. Tests of my resolve, of my newfound discipline. I no longer obeyed. I simply observed them, acknowledged their presence, and let them pass. This conscious refusal to act, this deliberate inaction, was my greatest strength. It was the ultimate form of control, self-control. My trading entries became fewer, drastically so, but each one carried a conviction born of deep, unwavering observation. The trades themselves were no longer a frantic dance, a desperate gamble, but a precise, almost surgical execution. I had discovered the power of dry powder, the capital and mental energy preserved by inaction, held ready for the undeniable moment. This conserved strength, both financial and psychological, became my most formidable asset. When the perfect setup finally screamed its presence, I struck with a calm decisiveness impossible in my former state of frantic activity. There was no hesitation, no second-guessing, only the smooth, disciplined execution of a plan forged in the crucible of patience. The financial results began to reflect this profound shift. The account blow-ups, those recurring nightmares, ceased entirely. The bleeding stopped. Profits began to flow, not in a torrent of adrenaline-fueled speculation, but in a steady, deliberate stream. These were not the exhilarating, short-lived wins of my past, often followed by even larger losses. These were calm, predictable returns, built on the bedrock of disciplined waiting. The feeling was different. Not the wild euphoria I once chased, but a quiet satisfaction, a deep, abiding sense of competence. The shame receded, the self-reproach faded, replaced by a growing self-respect. This wasn't just about making money. It was about reclaiming my peace of mind, my belief in my own judgment. It was about healing the wounds I had inflicted upon myself. The market, once a source of torment, became a profound teacher. It continued to reveal its lessons, not through intricate theories, but through the stark, undeniable reality of price action. It taught me about cycles, about the deep-seated human psychology that drives fear and greed, about the true nature of value and accumulation. But most importantly, it taught me about myself, about my own impulses, my inherent weaknesses, and my surprising capacity for self-mastery. The patience I cultivated wasn't passive resignation. It was an active, vigilant waiting. It was the relentless pursuit of absolute clarity, a refusal to act until that clarity was undeniable, until the odds were overwhelmingly in my favor. The empty spaces between trades were no longer voids I felt compelled to fill. They transformed into incubation periods. Periods of quiet growth, of learning, of strengthening my resolve. They were as vital as the trades themselves. I began to see the market as a vast, interconnected system, moving with its own inherent, often subtle, logic. My role was not to force it, to bend it to my will, but to understand its flow, to respect its rhythms, and to position myself only when the current was undeniably in my favor. The old habits, those deep-seated compulsions, tried to creep back into my consciousness. The whisper of what if still sometimes surfaced, tempting me to chase a fleeting movement, to break my discipline. But the memory of the abyss, of complete ruin, served as a powerful shield. The searing pain of past failures was a constant, visceral reminder of the true cost of impatience, of activity for activity's sake. I had chosen a different path, a path less traveled by the impatient, by those consumed by the urge to constantly do something, It was a lonely path sometimes, watching others chase every fleeting movement, hearing the noise of their frantic activity. But I knew their fate. I had lived it. I had paid the price. My peace of mind became more valuable than any potential quick profit. The market, in its brutal honesty, had stripped away all my illusions, leaving me with a single, undeniable truth. Mastery comes from stillness, not from struggle. It comes from the unwavering commitment to wait, to observe, to refuse anything less than the perfect setup. It comes from the profound understanding that the market does not care about my effort, my desperation, or my constant engagement. It only rewards the quiet, disciplined execution of a clear, patient strategy. This was the essence of my transformation. It was the fundamental shift from doing to being, from chasing the market to becoming one with its rhythm, moving only when called, with absolute precision. The market did not pay me for my endless effort. It paid me for my profound patience. This realization wasn't just intellectual, it permeated every fiber of my being, reshaping my perception of finance, of time, and of myself. It was a lesson etched in pain, but ultimately, it brought freedom. The freedom I found was not a sudden liberation, but a quiet, profound emancipation from my own mind's tyranny. It was the freedom to observe without needing to intervene, to exist within the market's ebb and flow, unconsumed. My thoughts, once a frantic maelstrom of greed and fear, settled into disciplined calm. My worth was not measured by trade frequency, but by my process's unwavering integrity. This internal liberation was patience's true dividend. The market continued its relentless dance. Yet I was no longer its puppet. I became an observer, a student, a participant only when conditions were absolutely, unequivocally aligned. This demanded monastic detachment. The temptation to engage, to chase fleeting whispers, still presented itself. A phantom itch, a ghost of my former self, a path abandoned. But now I possessed tools to disarm it. The abyss's memory, stark, unyielding, whispered a truth. Impatience's cost far exceeded any missed opportunity. My relationship with time itself transformed. The frantic urgency defining my old trading vanished. Time was no longer an enemy, but an ally. I understood true opportunities required ripening, a gestation period of watching, learning, refining. This waiting was active clarity, cultivation. Each day in observation, each moment of deliberate inaction, sharpened my perception, revealing the market's underlying truths with increasing precision. I learned to read the silence between movements, understanding forces at play, long before undeniable price action. This profound understanding extended beyond the charts. It permeated my entire being, reshaping how I approached decisions, challenges, even relationships. The principles of patience, discipline, and selective action, forged in the market's brutal fires, became the bedrock of my philosophy. I realized that life, like the market, often rewards restraint over reaction, observation over impulse, and the quiet strength of conviction over the noisy clamor of constant striving. These lessons were universal, etched not just into my trading ledger, but into my character's very fabric. I no longer sought external validation or quick wins. My satisfaction came from unwavering adherence to principles, from the quiet confidence of acting with integrity and purpose. The market, in its infinite indifference, paradoxically gifted me profound self-reliance. It stripped away illusions, ego, the need to be constantly right, replacing them with humble acceptance of its power and disciplined respect for its rhythms. The journey was not without doubt. Old demons resurfaced. But each time, I returned to the foundational truth. The market pays for patience. This was not merely a maxim. It was a living principle guiding every decision, stillness, every precise strike. It was the unwavering beacon leading me away from activity's chaos towards sustained profitability and profound peace. I had traded frantic pursuit for enduring understanding, desperate need for control, for serene acceptance of what truly matters. The freedom was in knowing I had finally learned to listen. And so, this profound understanding, forged in the fires of past failures, became my unwavering compass. The market, once a chaotic arena of torment, transformed into a disciplined teacher. its lessons etched not just in my ledger, but in the very core of my being. The frantic pursuit of activity, the desperate need to constantly do something, had been shed like an old skin. What remained was a quiet, potent mastery, born of stillness, cultivated through relentless self-observation, and rewarded by an indifferent, yet profoundly just system. My trading ceased to be a battle against the market. It became a symbiotic dance, moving with its natural rhythm, striking only when the melody of opportunity was undeniable. The conflicts, the internal struggles, the gnawing emptiness, all resolved, not through force, but through a profound surrender to the truth. The market pays for patience. This was not a theory. It was my lived reality, earned through countless hours of disciplined waiting, of refusing to chase whispers, of honoring the power of strategic inaction. The freedom I now experience is not merely financial. It is a liberation of spirit, a deep-seated peace that comes from aligning my actions with the market's immutable laws. It is the quiet confidence of knowing exactly who I am in this game, and what I am not. Therefore, I share this truth, not as a command, but as a revelation. This journey, painful and transformative, led me to a singular, undeniable conclusion. The true rewards, the lasting success, lie not in the frenzy of engagement, but in the profound wisdom of disciplined restraint. It is in the courage to wait, to observe, to refuse anything less than the perfect alignment. This is the lesson the market demands. We learn the price it extracts for our ignorance, and the immense bounty it bestows upon our understanding. If this reflection resonates with your own journey, if these words have sparked a deeper understanding within you, I invite you to engage with this message. Your thoughts, your insights, your own experiences are invaluable. Like, comment, subscribe to Livermore Mind, and join this ongoing conversation. For in sharing our paths, we collectively deepen our grasp of these timeless principles. The market does not pay you for activity. It pays you for patience. This is the ultimate, enduring truth.